All right, ready to go?
Yeah, we're ready.
Awesome. Hey, everybody tuning in online. Welcome to this evening's Guild Talk. This is SDR base stations with Raspberry Pis. I chose this really cool picture to start out with because there's a lot you can really get into on this topic. A lot more than we're going to be able to cover in the next hour or so. So I hope this inspires you to, go home where you're already at and build some really cool stuff. Not everything we're going to talk about here is going to cost a fortune. Prices have come way down. Most of the stuff we're going to talk about is stuff you can do without a ham license. So you're going to be able to start, with these projects immediately. And we're going to have a good time. So we'll cover some really cool stuff today. So thank you for the wonderful introduction. My name is Jonathan Singer. Our topics we'll cover today is a little bit about who am I, right? Some of you may have seen me or met me before. Hello. But if you haven't, I'll introduce myself. So I want to talk a little bit about the basics and history of radio. Now, I'm not going to get into this too deep because there's an entire level of education and communications that much more people out there are better at it than I am. So I just want to kind of really quickly discuss the basics just to get a level playing field for everybody as we go through some of the different topics to make sense of what we're talking about. Next, we'll talk about what is an SDR, right? We opened up with SDR base stations, Raspberry Pis, but what exactly is an SDR? Next, we'll kind of float over to some of this radio hardware and software. The basic components that we'll share and show today that can help you get started with your projects. Our first project we'll discuss is one called the Freq Show. We'll get into what that means in a little bit if you can guess. The second project is an ADS-B, or what we call next gen in the aviation industry. We'll see what that actually means. Planes are interesting. Our third project we'll cover is APRS. And for those that have their ham radio license, you may already be aware of what APRS is. But if you're not, think of it as almost like an offline airwave online communication system. It's really cool, and you can get involved with a Raspberry Pi. It's kind of that simple. We'll cover my favorite topics, which are legalities, and then finally where you can seek out extra information next, right? After this talk, some of the places that I consider wonderful wealths and sources of information, and then we'll get to some questions, including our online viewers. So, who am I? That's me in a photo shoot. I did things once with a suit, but now I have my master's in the cybers from locally here at USF. And I did my undergrad in Orlando at UCF. But some fun things, I am a goon at DEF CON, so if you see me wearing a red shirt running around the hallways in Las Vegas yelling at you, it's purely out of love, and also so that you don't get hurt. Here in Tampa, we have a local OWASP chapter. I run this with a wonderful team of individuals, and we all put in a ton of effort to make a really awesome, successful community there. B-Sides Orlando is one of the things back when I was living in Orlando that I was heavily involved with, still to this day a little bit, but we're coming up on our 8th year, I believe, now. So look out for that. It'll be online within the next couple of months. As mentioned, yeah, I do Splunk. I do it for a company called GuidePoint Security, and I have a great time doing it. Been doing it for quite a few years now, and look up some of my older talks if you've been in the area and come by them. If not, feel free to reach out to me on on the guild member Slack once you're in. I have certs. I don't care to list them. I just got a lot of certs, a lot of letters. They're cool. They're fun. Not to really say certs aren't bad, but and you start to get people with a lot of letters. And of course, an Undercroft Guild Master. So thank you for that. Let's begin with a little bit of a history lesson. Again, foundational. We all need to learn where we came from. So, what does that mean? Let's talk about a couple basic principles here, right? We got receiving and we got transmitting. So receiving, or RX, is listening, right? That's where you can passively exist. Think of it like sitting in a coffee shop, which you can't really do these days, but the idea is you can hear everything going on around you. And as long as you're not saying anything, you're listening, you're receiving data. So RX is the kind of vernacular for receiving, okay? And for the most part, what we'll talk about today is receiving, because these things exist already in the air around us. We can receive all kinds of signals simply by putting up our antenna and just seeing what's there. Now, TX, or transmitting, right? That's the act of sending. That's the act of reciprocating, and that's adding to those airwaves. Now, this active, transmission, that's where things get a little bit iffy, okay? And that's where we start to walk a really fine line on maybe what's legal, or simply just may require a ham license, right? And so you may just need to be properly authorized to perform radio transmissions. But for now, for the most part, you can receive, and that's pretty okay. And so I have this little illustration here to kind of, show. We control from one end, which is our transmitter, right? We're sending things, versus our receiver, which is going to be that other end. So maybe that controller, maybe it's like an RC car, right? So one is clearly going to be receiving, and one's clearly going to be transmitting. And so that's just to kind of lay down some nice groundwork. Our next is the illustration on the left. And what we see here is this involves the moving of the amplitude, so the intensity, the vertical, the up and down of our signal, right, of the carrier wave. Whereas FM, right, the frequency modulation or the frequency changing is going to be the width between each of these waves. And you can see from the illustration, our AM signal at the bottom is going to have, peaks that are going to have highs and lows that are coming from our information signal. Whereas with FM, that peak is going to remain consistent, but our frequency is going to shift and change. And again, there's all kinds of deep dives that we can really go down with this stuff, and that's not what today is about. You'll learn a lot of this if you get into ham license training, if you have a military background in comms, things like that. Cover a lot of these basics, and also lots of college classes cover this. And again, we're not getting into it. I just want to make sure we have a basic understanding of receiving and transmitting, and the difference between amplitude and frequency modulation. So that's basically it as far as the groundwork. Now that we've got that out of the way, let's get into what we're talking about today. So these SDRs. And it's that software-defined radio, right? And so software-defined radio is defined simply as a radio communication system where the components have been traditionally implemented in hardware, we'll figure out what that means in a second, are instead implemented by means of software on a computer or embedded system. And so what exactly are we saying here? We're saying that radios traditionally take in a signal and do all of the manipulation and all the filtering and amplification and modulation and do all these different things within the device itself, right? So it's a very confined, purpose-built unit. And this is how it has been for years, right? Think of a standard radio that you listen to music on. That piece of hardware does one thing really well because it's a purpose-built device. At the beginning, we're receiving that signal in from our antenna, but what happens is then the signal is then manipulated and modified accordingly to serve, right? Now, software-defined radio abstracts a lot of that filtering and modulation and splitting of all this different stuff, and it offloads that to a computer. Well, what does that allow us to do if we offload a previously hardwired system? Can anybody guess? More mobile, yeah. But it allows us to, money, right? Hardware costs money. But it allows us to be dynamic with it. It allows us to change right? So no longer we're dealing with a purpose-built piece of hardware where the signal ends at the hardware very quickly, and then all of the fancy stuff, right, all of the math happens on the computer. And if I want to change the purpose, I can do it on the computer dynamically in software. So suddenly, that radio seems super archaic if it can only do one thing. I wish it could do 10 things, right? So if we take it all the way back to where the signal initially comes in, and we use something like an analog to digital converter, now suddenly we put all that responsibility in software. And so that's what we've done here, is we've taken predefined functionality and allowed it to be a lot more dynamic. So let's talk about the history of the software-defined radio, and even just the concept of hooking up a piece of equipment to a computer. So the first digital receiver, right, this term was coined back in the 70s by researchers at the Department of Defense. There was an effort to figure out how to make something a little bit more useful, right? When you build it once as this hardware, you have to build an entirely separate device to do a completely different function. Then this concept of a software radio, this was introduced back in '84 by E-Systems, which has since been acquired by Raytheon, defense contractor. But what they did is they really took off with applying an input of hardware into a computer, and they designed software around this, and they really started to pioneer the concept that we were starting to see. This research led directly into an article being published in IEEE, a very prestigious engineering journal, back in '92, to really show what's capable with this new concept, this revolutionary idea of working with computers and signal and radio data. And then finally, the software-defined radio that we pretty much know it as today was finally coined in '95, and that actually came also similarly from a military effort, right? And so we can see there's a long history of comms and military ties, and we can start to piece together the puzzle of what was going on, you know, back in the day. And what it was called the Speakeasy Program, right? And this has actually grown a lot. There's a Speakeasy 2 and things like that. But it was the first public, right, software-defined radio initiative, and this was DARPA Air Force, right? And so DARPA is one of the great agencies that brought us, you know, paid self-driving cars way before Tesla was doing it and way before it was cool. And so they had a military project called Speakeasy, right? And so the goal of Speakeasy was to make these military radios programmable. Because if they needed to change the purpose of them dynamically, quickly, right? And they needed to operate on different frequencies very quickly and do all kinds of different things in the field, right? Like imagine if you're doing something in the military and you discover that your enemy is using an entirely different set of technology. That means you have to go all the way back to the drawing board to rebuild a new piece of hardware, right? Well, if you have software-defined radio, you can quickly adapt to how they're transmitting, what frequencies they're transmitting on, what filters and methods and modulations they're using. We can do this all very quickly to be able to listen in on their signal, okay? And the goal, right, and I mentioned this, was to easily incorporate new coding and modulation standards in the future so that we can, you know, try to keep up with what was going on with all of these other, you know, adversaries and other communication methods. And so, like all good fun things like Tor, our government kind of brought us to these wonderful toys we're at today through their military research and grants. So it's a little bit of background. We've come a long way since 1995. We really have. You know, a lot of this equipment, as cool as it sounds, was still revolutionary at the time. It was very expensive. It was very lab. It was very research. It was very, you know, it was a whole new concept at the time. If anybody can remember, like, you know, computers used to be really expensive, and now they're moderately cheap. And the same thing, when we were talking back in the day, this is a new concept in technology. Things were very expensive, and it wasn't your average consumer, or even most commercial people were using this or even knew about it. So, let's take a look at modern day SDR hardware, right? And again, I mentioned this earlier, that analog to digital converter. We're taking stuff right out of the airwaves and we're converting it to a digital signal that our computers can process and work with. So the first one, this is one of my favorite, one of the better known, a little bit more powerful components out there. This one's called the HackRF One. And in a second, we'll get over there. So what's interesting about this is it's called a half duplex transceiver. And so we talked about receivers and transmitters. So transceivers, a little bit of both right in the middle. And it can only send or receive. But what it can do is it can send, but it is capable of both. It operates from 1 megahertz to 6 gigahertz, right? And there's a myriad, a ton of really cool things in that frequency range. You can go on the FCC's website and take a look at what is registered across all of these different spectrums. And so you can get an idea of what's capable. Wi-Fi runs on 2.4, Bluetooth runs on 2.4 gigs. So that's right there in the middle. Cellular, right, is around 900, 800 megahertz and upwards. That's in that range, okay? All kinds of remote controlled devices like your garage door opener, you can just let your imagination go from there. It does 2 million samples per second, so imagine it's constantly sniffing the airwaves, right? And again, this is software configurable to do both receiving and transmitting, and also it has some built-in filters to help you get some of that offloaded, data. One of the cool things is that you can actually hook up a powered antenna to this too. Again, another rabbit hole, but the idea is sometimes antennas can be amplified with a little bit of juice, and this also supports powered antennas. At the end of the day, the whole thing runs on USB. That means you can hook it up to your computer. It's a very powerful tool. It's open source hardware. So the whole thing is online, the code, the hardware, the chips, everything about it. And the best part is it's a $333 unit that is extremely dangerous and extremely powerful. Or you can go online and get a clone. Because it is open source, other people simply just took the hardware designs, manufactured it themselves, and are selling it just as much. So you pick and choose. So our first visual demo for today is I wanted to give an honorable mention to this little device over here. So what I have here is a portable HackRF with what's called a PortaPack. And a PortaPack, inside this case, is a HackRF, is a battery pack. And then shielded on top of the device is a jog wheel to navigate and a full color touchscreen. And so these PortaPacks are very handy to take your HackRF, which can not just receive but also transmit, and take it with you on the road or wherever you're going. And so right now I don't have it doing anything, but it is very capable in many ways. And so you can pick up a lot of this hardware online. Great Scott Gadgets is the one who originally designed the HackRF One, but I mentioned that you can also get some of this stuff overseas, reputable clones just as much. So we'll bring the camera back over here. And by the way, if anybody wants to mess with it after, you're more than welcome to. Just bring your Lysol wipes. And I don't know, do we have those? I gotta say it. Yeah, cool. So, but I did want to do an honorable mention, mostly because this is truly a software-defined radio, but it's not a computer in the sense of like a Raspberry Pi or your desktop or laptop, but it is still running code. It's still open source. And I thought it was just really cool, and I wanted to at least share some of the different options that are out there. It's got a headphone jack to listen to any kind of audio that is being received out of the airwaves, so think like FM radio. My particular model has a battery built in, not all of them do, so it's ultra portable. And a ton of features, all the bells and whistles you could ever want and imagine. So if you have any questions about it, please let me know, and I will point you in the right direction of how to acquire one of these wonderful borderline tools. What's the question? It is rechargeable. Yep, it is a LiPo battery built in. In fact, I have it on the charger right now, but I can unplug it and it will continue operating. I haven't figured that out yet. I've had no issues with battery life, but I also don't test its limits. It's got a built-in 1,000 milliamp hour battery. So, but that's this particular one. So anyways, check it out. Next really cool piece of hardware I wanted to mention. This is called the LimeSDR. All right, and if you thought a HackRF One with the capabilities of receiving and transmitting were cool, these LimeSDRs are nuts. They're full duplex. That means we can send and receive at the same time, not just one or the other. And that gives us interesting capabilities that that half doesn't get. It operates from 100 kilohertz, so very low frequency, to 3.8 gigahertz. Still covers most of the things we would want to pick up today. Really, beyond that, there isn't too much once you get into that high spectrum range. And I just listed a couple examples here, but one of the ones that I really wanted to point out that the LimeSDR can do with full duplex is we can do stuff like cellular base stations. A LimeSDR is capable of setting up an LTE tower on this little guy right here. Obviously, you need amplification, but from a software perspective and a baseline hardware perspective, this is capable of building your own cell phone network. Pretty cool. And at the lonely little price of also about $300, you can be just as dangerous. It's really interesting what the hardware market today is capable of with just the cost of chips, and manufacturing overseas has just really driven down the capabilities of a lot of this stuff. Now, the LimeSDR is not open source like the HackRF One, so you won't necessarily see clones of it. You can really only get it from authorized distributors, so there isn't like a cheaper alternative. But if you're really into this stuff, it's definitely worth the investment. And honestly, it kind of just goes up from here. There's even more crazier devices that just have more inputs and outputs and have more frequency range capabilities. And that's a whole nother thing that we're no longer being a hobbyist, I would say, at that point. And so let's keep this a hobby. Let's keep it fun. Let's keep it safe, right? Totally. So let's get to what we really came here for, the SDR, but not just any SDR, the RTL-SDR. RTL? The hell was RTL make special? Well, it's the Realtek RTL. In fact, it comes from the chip, the name of the microchip. That's the primary, component of these little USB sticks. Now, compared to the previous two, this is much smaller. In fact, I have one right here. I'll bring it on camera. This is it, really. It's this big, tiny little thing. No, it's about the size of a thumb drive, and that's basically it. And jam-packed in this little device is everything you need to get started with scanning and surfing the airwaves. Okay, and so this Realtek chip was originally used for people to listen to radio and watch TV on their laptops. And that's what it was for a long time. In fact, some of these original ones, this one I have here is DVB-T plus DAB plus FM. So they're digital video tuners to pick up analog TV and radio on your laptop. So that's what they originally kind of were out there for. And it was discovered that the tuning was being done by software. That kind of turned on a light and said, well, wait a minute, the software controls the full functionality of this device, and all of the TV part and the radio part is done on the computer and it's not done on the device. Well, can I reprogram it for another purpose, right? This different type of modulation and filtering and other needs? Absolutely. So this is the new standard. There's a lot of reasons it's the new standard. It's cheap. I mean, the one I have here, the RTL-SDR, the branded one from the RTL-SDR community, that's only $20, $25. You can get these things for a couple bucks overseas, really. Now, obviously, these more expensive models They're going to have higher quality components. They're going to have better oscillators inside, which is very important, right? Everything's built on a frequency, and as we can, focus in on that frequency, that's the goal. So they're just better overall when it comes to more accurate in their capabilities and measurement. But at the end of the day, same purpose. 24 megahertz to 1.7 gigahertz range, and still that covers a ton of things. There's all kinds of devices that are operating in the 315 megahertz range, the 433 megahertz range, the 900 megahertz range, the 800 megahertz range. This is still a great budget tool, and I have a bunch of them. In fact, I have 3 myself. 2 of these cheapy TV radio ones, but I do actually have one of the branded ones that you see here on this slide. Now, unlike the previous 2 that are totally dangerous, this is receive only, right? These aren't transmitting. There's people out there that can get into the hardware and mod it, but we want to listen. We want to see what's out there. We want to see what we can do with that wonderful data. And so I highly suggest these things. They're fun, they're cheap, they're very readily available on Amazon. And this is a great starting platform for anybody who wants to get into SDR and learn and experiment. This is definitely the starting point for everybody's adventure. And I just really wanted to remind everybody online, we do listen to you, and if you have any questions at any time, please feel free to chime in.
I've got a couple.
Oh, you do?
Yeah.
Oh, please. I'd love to hear the questions online. Just throw them up.
Yeah. So this one's from RJ45.
Oh, hey, RJ.
He says, "What's the appeal use case examples of the HackRF One?"
So the use case and the appeal of this is the fact that it can transmit. So that's going to be the first one. But basically, it also just has a very wide capability of frequencies that it can pick up. Its spectrum is massive, up to 6 gigahertz. And most devices on the market today do not go that far. So if you are targeting something in the higher frequency range, or if you do require potential transmission, the HackRF One will help cover all of those needs. So hope that answers your question.
And then I've got one from Glenn. What's better now than in 1995 besides the FiOS?
The software has changed a lot. The hardware has grown and become more accurate. It's also that it's achievable by the average consumer. So again, we're talking just a couple bucks now for the cheapy overseas clones. This stuff was thousands, if not tens of thousands, about hundreds of thousands of dollars back in the day. And so the difference between 95 and now is that you can too. Back then, you had to be military grade, defense contractor, research lab, university, to achieve just some of the basic capabilities of what a child can code overnight now with these things. So we've just advanced a lot in a long way, and I can't wait to see what comes next.
And then, not really a question, but Vodkanaut says every time you speak, his bank account gets smaller. Every time.
He should set up some kind of like crowdfunding, source funding for that, because I can't control his spending, but what I can control is his imagination, and I'm going to send it to the moon.
There you go.
So, awesome. Well, thanks for that. It gets better. So this right here is a really cool project. They took 4 RTL-SDRs and shoved them in a case, and that allows for very interesting things to happen. That allows you to take multiple SDRs and do comparisons with each other and overlap them and make it even more powerful. And so suddenly you have all this extra functionality added when you start to layer these pieces of hardware. You can do direction finding. So one of the cool things so take a look at this. You have an antenna north, south, east, and west. And then you have a signal. And you can measure the strength at each antenna to determine which direction the source is coming from. This is really cool. I mean, modern methods for cell phone tracking is triangulation, strength between 3 or more towers. Well, we now have the capability to do our own triangulation or quadrulation. I don't know whatever the word is called for 4, but you are now simply capable of measuring signal strength from a source and then determining the approximate direction in which the origin of that source is. Like, this is extremely useful for people that may be lost, right, in the desert or in a jungle, and they have some kind of radio equipment on them, right? Or this may be useful for tracking down criminals that are actively using radio technology to transmit in a legal manner, right? So it's really interesting what we can do for this. Passive radar and beamforming are just a couple of the other things. And again, super rabbit hole there, but I'll let you Google that one. But when you bring together and when you make 4 RTL-SDRs coherent with each other, it's extremely interesting what's capable. And what I really like most about this piece of hardware is not just a lot of that functionality and feature set, but it has a Raspberry Pi header right on top of it. It's asking to be hooked up to a Raspberry Pi. It wants to be part of your toys and do cool things, right? So give your Raspberry Pi a home right on top of the Kerberos. It's right there. But anyways, check these things out. These are also a little on the pricey side. Very purpose-built. If you're into this stuff, great, but it is still a hobbyist and consumer grade. So,
do you have the PortaPack for that?
No. So the PortaPack is a purpose-built shield for the HackRF One, and it matches an interface. It's just a pin-to-pin match. And the HackRF One came first as a universal piece of hardware. The PortaPack was a shield that was added on top of it to make it a standalone device independent of a computer. So you must be asking yourself, stop teasing me with all these things and draining my bank account. What can I do with these things? Why am I here in the first place? That's a lot. I don't expect you to read all these. It's a big list. In fact, it probably looks really small on a stream too. But I highlighted a couple of fun things that I thought would pique everybody's interest. The first one I highlighted was tracking aircraft without a radar system using plane's own communication. Super cool. All right. Decoding POC and flex pager traffic. Did you know we still have pagers today? And I'm not talking like cool and retro, like, yo, check out my pager. I mean, like, actually, hospitals and emergency services actively use pagers today. They're extremely reliable. And they get the point across, right, very quickly and very effectively. And they don't really break down like we have cell phones crashing and iOS and Android security vulnerabilities and updates. It's a very standardized system that's just extremely robust. And so we still use them today. And we can listen to them. It's also floating in the airwaves. Sniffing GSM signals. This is fun, right? Yeah, cell phones. Cool. Dangerous. Please be careful. Listening to FM radio and decoding RDS information. Going back to the roots of this stuff, right? Well, some of this hardware was originally designed just to listen to the radio on the computer because maybe at the time just something wasn't available or you wanted to record the radio, right? So a lot of basic, really cool basic stuff. I highlighted the receiving NOAA weather satellite images, right? That's really cool. We'll get into a lot of these examples. The last one I highlighted was listening to the International Space Station. I think that's awesome. As like a huge nerd, the fact that we already know it's floating overhead, right, in suspended orbit, but it's actively communicating back with Earth. I mean, we got that. They have internet in the space station. But did you know that the space station's actively broadcasting all kinds of great information that you can listen in on for fun publicly? It's super. What was that? Yeah, exactly. We'll play. We'll play with it in a second. Okay. So just a couple things you can do once you really start to get into software-defined radio. So we covered the hardware. Real quickly, we'll talk about some of the software because a lot of this stuff still pertains to the desktop, laptop, PC world, right? But today we really want to talk about Raspberry Pis. But at least I'll give you a little taste of what you can do on your computers in the meantime. And so there's some really good tools out there, Windows, Linux, Mac, stuff like that. GNU Radio is like the super nerd version. And I mean that in the kindest way because it's extremely manual, extremely verbose, right? And when we talked about that hardware process initially being abstracted from the predefined device and bringing that into the computer to do all the math and the calculations and the filtering, GNU Radio is the kind of place that you would achieve that because you can manually rebuild that hardware data process from start to finish, splitting signals, bringing them back together, amplification, all kinds of stuff. And so it's a really cool tool, and so you can get all kinds of pre-built templates for different purposes, or you can build your own. This is the communication person's dream. This stuff is intense. By the way, I will be sharing these slides, so they will be made available online. And that's to you online too, so look out for the information when I share them. GQRX, this is what I currently use on my Mac. I plug in a USB, RTL-SDR, fire up GQRX, and I get all kinds of great spectrum analysis here. I can tune it. I can change some of the different functionality. I can look at it from different perspectives. I get waterfall views, so I can see signal strengths. Just really cool stuff. And again, it's on a multitude of platforms. SDR Sharp. This one is for Windows, if you can imagine Sharp, C Sharp, right? Okay, so Microsoft. But it's a super powerful Windows tool. I highly suggest it if you're in a Windows environment. It's a fantastic tool set. It has a ton of modular capability and plugins. It's been around for a long time, very versatile. And a lot of the really cool functionality you saw on the previous slide can be done with SDR Sharp because of its wide variety of capabilities. And then there was another piece of hardware I didn't really mention. I thought about it, but we talked a lot about hardware, and I didn't want to make your bank cry anymore. But SDR Uno is another wonderful piece of software from the SDR Play team. And SDR Play is another one of these boxes that hooks up in USB and does all this wonderful, sweet magic that makes you the commander of the airwaves. So let's jump into the first hardware project that you can build yourself. And I kind of hinted at this earlier. We're going to call it the Freq Show. Well, I didn't call it that. The developers called it that. It's going to be fun. So we'll bring on the Freq Show. What this is a Raspberry Pi spectrum analyzer, scanner, device, visual. And so this frequency analyzer pairs a Raspberry Pi with a touchscreen. So you get a visual, so it's all in one cube unit, right? And you run the standard Raspberry Pi OS, or Raspbian as it used to be called, right? And pretty simple. And it supports any of the RTL-SDR hardware that is that works with the standard library. So whether it's that special silver one directly from RTL-SDR website, or the little cheapo import radio ones, supports all of them. And when you make it portable with a battery pack, you are really making this thing fun. So you have the capability of having your own spectrum analyzer in the palm of your hands. And so we'll real quickly take a look at what some of this hardware looks like. And so I brought one with me today. And so over here on the table, as we bring the camera, this is the device right here. And so I actively have it on listening. And so this is SDR, and you can see it's running entirely off of a battery pack. And so in the case is the Raspberry Pi, and the touchscreen's on top. I have my RTL-SDR hooked up here to my external antenna. And this antenna is not tuned for any particular frequency. And by the way, that's a thing, that antennas are designed to match the frequency that you're trying to pick up. In fact, the height matters in that case. But again, a whole nother theory we're not going to get into. And so this device is a touchscreen, and so I can get here and I can change the frequency that I want to listen on. I can change all kinds of different sensitivities. And right now I actually have it tuned to 103.5 because that's a radio station in the area. And so it gives us a very good, clear signal here. And I have it in waterfall mode, but I can change it over to our frequency analysis mode, and we can see the spikes in our area that we're currently tuned to. So things are really cool, and it's a wonderful little portable device. This one's built on a Raspberry Pi 4, but the documentation makes it, it was originally designed for the original Raspberry Pi 1 when that first came out. And so you're not limited to any particular level of hardware. It doesn't take a lot to achieve this. All right, so we'll head back over to the little talking station. And so that's a freak show, right? And so what does it take to ultimately build one of these things, right, for yourself? And so let's take a look at the assembly process. And so what we have here is we have a cheap Pi case, right? It's just plastic, picked it up on Amazon, and it came with the touchscreen. So it's more or less a case with a touchscreen that connects right to the GPIO header, all in one, makes it super easy, okay? And an SDR. And really, that's all that you need to achieve this goal. And so the antenna that comes with it, for the most part, is just fine, right? How are we doing? Okay. But if you want to get a more tuned antenna, if you're looking for a very specific task, be my guest. The one I'm using has what's called an SMA connector on it, and it allows you to simply just screw on all kinds of other antennas. I brought a couple as an example. And then I prefer the stylus because I'm really weird about getting touchscreens dirty, but also it's a little bit better with the accuracy. Although it is a fairly big screen with big buttons is for what we're trying to do. But that's really it. You can get this stuff on Amazon, dirt cheap. It really only is a combination of a touchscreen case kit, an RTL-SDR, and a Raspberry Pi. Obviously, I don't need to tell you that a Raspberry Pi needs a memory card and a power source, but I'll leave that up to you for the purpose of this. Hope this is one of the simpler, easier projects to build. And so to set this thing up, we install our Raspberry Pi operating system, right? Very simple. We install our screen drivers. Wherever you bought it from, they'll have instructions for setting up your screen. Mine was very simple. I just ran a script and then boom, everything was working. And then we installed the software. And so this is initially developed by Adafruit. If everybody's familiar with Adafruit, it's a wonderful hardware manufacturer and reseller. Has all kinds of great stuff on their website and just wonderful documentation, videos, and they support the community. So check them out. And so they initially built the Freak Show project. And then at the end, you just run the Python script, run Freak Show. I actually set it up so that on boot up, it automatically runs it. So as soon as I power the device on, it boots into the OS and then goes straight to Freak Show. So I don't really have to do anything. It's up and running on its own within seconds. And so that's the optional step, is to make it start up automatically. And so you can see here on the screen, I'm featuring a couple of the settings, and so we can see the frequencies that you have it tuned to, right? The intensities of the signal and how big those jumps are going to be for the amplitude, and all kinds of different things. You can, again, set up your center frequency or where you're initially tuned to, so you can see around it with a nice narrow bandwidth sampling rate. Terminology I'm still working on. But it's a lot of fun. It's super cool. And it's a great first project. And in the meantime, you get yourself a nice touchscreen. The whole thing, at the end of the day, I think I spent just shy of $70 on everything. Super cheap SDR, touchscreen kit, and then any Raspberry Pi will do. So definitely check it out. And so that is your first project with your SDR base station. Something cool I really wanted to mention was a lot of these tools, right? A lot of software and Raspberry Pis were kind of made for each other, right? Like this was developed by Adafruit. You know, they thought the marriage of the touchscreen and the SDR and the Pi was cool, and I think it is too. But there has been a community that has made an SDR-focused Pi image. Right? This image is an all-in-one, so we don't even have to now just install components and in different pieces at a time. We can install this one image, and it has a ton of supported software already built in. And so some of these things are that GNU radio. It is already built into this SDR Pi image. There's that GQRX I talked about. There's some of the Lime stuff. If you have a LimeSDR, the software's already there, right? And then all kinds of additional tools, right? Multimon, that's a crazy thing with taking the data and all kinds of fun stuff. So if you're really into taking your Raspberry Pi and doing all kinds of interesting SDR functionality and data and different hardware and different SDRs that you've purchased over time, check out this OS. Again, it's purpose-built. It supports the variety of Raspberry Pi devices out there. Okay, so the next one we're going to jump to is my personal, I don't want to say favorite, but it's my longest running Pi that I've ever owned, and I'll explain why. And so our second project is plane spotting for the rest of us. And I know it sounds crazy. In fact, I chose this background of like an air traffic control center to kind of hint at where we're going with this. So at my house and at many homes and offices and places and domiciles across the world, people run SDRs monitoring airplane traffic. This is actually a screenshot taken about a month ago when I was starting to put these slides together from St. Pete, from my house. And this is just a couple of airplanes that were transmitting loud enough and within range that my little receiver could pick them up. And so this is super cool. And so you can turn your Raspberry Pi into an airplane tracking base station. And there's a lot of functionality you can get out of this stuff. And so I mentioned it's my longest running Pi and project and things. So I'm currently running my FlightAware, PiAware base station here on a Pi 1, like the original Raspberry Pi from years and years and years and years ago, flawlessly in my windowsill for the current time, like not disconnecting it, 3 years straight. The only time it ever gets shut off is when the power goes out or I bring it here. It has consistently survived everything in my windowsill on the second floor to just listen to plane data. It's so fun. And so let's talk about why I'm doing this in the first place and what you can do with it too and why it's cool and why it's interesting, right? And so first thing first is planes talk. Planes talk a lot. They communicate. And so this project came out and it was called NextGen. But it uses what we call ADS-B. And this is the communication between planes. And obviously the ground too, we can hear it. And what are planes saying? Right? They're talking a lot. They're talking about what's my identification rate? What's my tail? Right? And so our first one here is SWA 37. What airline is that? Southwest Airlines, exactly. So Southwest Airlines Flight 37 is flying over my neighborhood, right? And it's squawking at 1442. That's some radio stuff, right? Okay. Its altitude is 12,800 and climbing, so we can see its vertical velocity. Okay. Its speed in knots, 349 knots. It's hauling ass. Although it probably could go faster. Should be around 500. Its distance from me is 11.2 nautical miles, so how far away it is from my geographical location. Because I have programmed it like this is my GPS coordinates versus your GPS coordinates, okay? Heading, which way it's flying in, right? More velocity information. Messages. Now, messages is all the messages I'm receiving, okay? So I've received 1,200 broadcasts from this plane during its flight duration in my vicinity, okay? And the age, that's just a second counter, right? So it's been 8 seconds since I've received the last message, right? So planes talk a lot. They're saying all kinds of information, and they're sharing it with each other, right? And so why do we think that planes should be telling the world about themselves? A lot of planes in the air, right? That's a reality. And
so you're calculating all this information just based on
Correct. They chat on a very well-defined protocol, and therefore I can decode this and listen into all of the plane chatter. That is correct. Collision avoidance is a great example, right? And if a plane is aware of another plane, that's a whole safety factor that we can add in here. Also, there's just simple awareness that a plane is out there, right? We've heard of, it's gone off the radar, right? Where did it go? And so this is another way that planes can communicate with each other and the ground for safety and monitoring. Oh, yes, people with jetpacks. I'm at 800 feet and there's a guy with a jetpack here. And I don't even want to know. But anyway, so ADSB is cool. So FlightAware is a website, and they put out the PiAware project. And so all of the live data on FlightAware.com is actually coming from these base stations. When you set up the PiAware software, you can agree to share your findings back with FlightAware, and they combine all the data from all of the ground stations and post it online. So there's theoretical data of where a plane may be, but then there's actual measurement data coming from all these different base points all over the globe, uploading it simultaneously to get the most accurate plane location data for online sharing. It's really cool. And so besides uploading it, your device, that web interface was running on the Raspberry Pi. And so I can also see live up-to-date information locally on my network, alongside whatever I may be sharing out. Now, data from this is then measured, and you get all kinds of cool metrics and scores, and it's fun, and you can see on a map where all the other base stations are. And I'll tell you, for the most part, America's pretty saturated. Most of the major countries are saturated. But you'll find people setting up these ADSB receivers in very remote places simply to capture the ongoing air traffic data overhead. And so it's really fun to be a part of this. I've been doing it for a long time. It doesn't take a lot to really get into it. And it's quite interesting. When the last one I have to mention, of course, is that you get an enterprise account for also uploading and being part of the sharing community, which I use all the time, or used to, because I used to travel a lot. And I could look at where a plane was anytime while I'm sitting in the airport waiting for that plane to arrive late at the gate. And so instead of talking to the person at the counter and going, so when is this plane arriving? Am I going to miss my next flight? I could simply go online, look up the inbound flight to my outbound flight, figure out where in the world it was, if it was flying around the cloud for rain or something like that. So I found a lot of value out of having that elevated status account. So let's talk about the technology behind this and what's really going on behind the scenes. It's fairly simple, right? So ADSB operates on 1090 megahertz, and there's also a portion of this in America that operates on 978 megahertz. And so what's happening is planes are communicating. We kind of cover that, and they're very chatty, and they talk a lot about who they are and where they're going and what speed they're going at and what altitude they're going at and where in the world they are. And then they squawk this. They're constantly shooting this message out. And so the PiAware image is a pre-built image. You can get this directly from FlightAware on their website. You download it, and you just flash it to your little SD card, and boom, you're up and running, and everything's good to go. You just have to configure a couple things about your account and what's your current GPS location if you're interested in participating in MLAT. And that's just a multilateral. But the software, right, the real code behind this, and you can do this entirely separate from FlightAware and PiAware. If you just want to see plane data and without any ties to anybody, Dump 1090 is the suite. Dump 1090 is the tool that interacts with your SDR, tunes it, brings the data in, and then runs that web service to plot all of that data on top of Google Maps. And so Dump 1090 is the tool set that gets you all that wonderful commercial aviation information. And then Dump 970 is similar, but it does it for the planes and devices that are operating on 970. Now, there's all kinds of laws around who's required to have ADSB and at what altitude. So commercial flights and high altitude devices, planes, Boeings, Airbus, stuff like that is going to have ADSB. Smaller, more hobbyist, more personal flight doesn't necessarily need to have ADS-B. And again, there's a lot of laws around that, and they may use 970 instead of 1090. And FAA, somebody else's regulation, not mine. But as long as it exists, I want to listen to it. I want to pull it in, and I want to see what it's all about, right? And so it's really cool stuff. And I have the FlightAware branded SDR. Again, they went out of their way to make a piece of hardware that's just using high-grade equipment and good microchips and good, components to give it the best, cleanest signal, not like the cheap ones that are made out of plastic, similar to the expensive metal enclosure on the SDR, the RTL-SDR.com version. And so these are really cool too, and they're also they're not expensive to get into this. And so what does it take to get started? Well, it takes a Pi with a case. I mean, you really don't need a case. I have a case. Screen's optional, right? You could potentially put that web page on the screen, or you can just view that web page from another device, or you could just never view the web page because you're just constantly uploading and sharing the data and using the PiAware website. All right, again, you need an SDR. So far we're at Pi and we're at SDR. And then we need an antenna. And this, compared to the previous project, you want to try to have something a little bit better tuned. Again, the stock antenna you can get by with, but a tuned antenna, more honed into that 1090 frequency, you'll find that you'll receive more messages. And so to calculate how big of an antenna you need, there's online tools, but the idea is taking the size of the wave, and you can have an antenna that's a quarter wavelength or a half wavelength ultimately. And that will just, again, help you kind of tune out some of that chatter and be able to get better messages received from the airplanes. And so the other key thing here I mentioned, and I talked about this earlier, is I run it on the second floor in the window. You want a clear view of the sky. You want a clear view of where the planes are, because they're going to be broadcasting and you are trying to receive this data. So either elevated is the main key. If you can run an antenna outdoors safely, that's even better. I know people that have installed like a very major 1090 tuned antenna on their roof at an super elevated height, and you can easily see planes from 200 to 300 miles away. I mean, it's really impressive what you can see. Now, from my house, with this, here, I'll put it on camera, but this little rinky-dink antenna that I actually cut to be a quarter wavelength because the stock height was too much, I usually pick up easily 50 miles. I can pick up some in the 100-mile range, and then rarely, every once in a while, I get one in the 150-mile range. But yeah, if I had a proper antenna and I set it up outside, I can easily see traffic from Orlando flying overhead, which is a very busy airport, as you know. So very cool, very fun. This project has been around for a long time. As like I said, I'm running it on my original Pi 1. And this one's been powered on for 3 years straight in the window. Before I moved to my current location, I also ran it for another 2 years consistently there. So this is a long time running thing for me, and I really enjoy it. I think it's a lot of fun. And so what's capable. And so to get yourself set up with this, now that you have your Pi and your SDR, similar set of hardware as your previous build, you can install your favorite Raspbian or Raspberry Pi OS, and then just install the tool set to stack on top. Or you can, again, use the PiAware OS directly from FlightAware. It's right on their website. And then if you're interested in sharing the data, you claim your device on the website and you set up the authentication and where you're located and stuff like that, and they'll put you on the map, and boom, that's it. You're uploading and you're streaming. And so this right here is one of the devices, and it's nothing really more than a screen on the Pi, and that's just the website, like that's running on the device. So you can like look at it locally in a browser, or you can look at it on your computer. So screen is entirely optional. It's not necessary unless you want to make it maybe portable. One really cool thing I've seen a lot of people do is they build these devices, but they are a small aircraft pilot. So they build it so that they can bring it on their plane with them, especially if they don't have the very expensive avionics hardware to do this. Because if you think cars and pimping out cars are expensive, planes are even more expensive. And so oftentimes small pilots using their own planes that don't have fancy bells and whistles can build a portable Raspberry Pi with a screen like this just while they're flying so that they can see all of the data around them. And at altitude, your signal is great, so you can see for a long way away. And the other thing too is you'll learn a lot about planes by the way they fly and their flight patterns. For instance, like we have highways on the ground, planes have highways in the sky, and you can actually see that in the flight patterns and the directions of a lot of these aircrafts that you can pick up. One of the cool things I did with my PiAware was during the start of some of the civil unrest and protests is the police threw their whirlybirds, their helicopters up, right? And those helicopters also broadcast ADS-B. And so I was able to see the flight patterns of police helicopters in the areas over downtown Tampa and over downtown St. Pete. And it was very interesting as you can tell when things were going on or if there was a police chase down the highway because you can see the helicopter traveling. I think I sent it to you guys. I was like, oh, they're out tonight. There's the police helicopters. And a little bit of research, you can figure out what the tail number of a police helicopter in the area is, and then you can simply watch for it on your newly built device. So that is project number 2. Now, I wanted to make another honorable mention. Planes aren't the only things you can track. You can also track boats too. We are in a port city here in Tampa. Therefore, we see all kinds of great large vessels. I originally called this boats and something else, but I decided I'm on a boat was better. So oil tankers, right? Whether they're on fire or not, you can track all kinds of cool stuff too. So I just wanted to mention this as like a side project, like maybe like a bonus with your plane tracking is why don't you take a look at where boats are also. So boats have their own software suites and they have their own capabilities and their own hardware. So this particular software, right, is called OpenCPN. And you'll find, just like pilots bring ADS-B devices on their planes if they don't have one built in, like the little PiAware station, captains will run OpenCPN on their boats, on a laptop, for instance, if they don't have fancy, expensive boat navigation and boat tracking software. So super cool. You can do this from home if you're close enough to a waterway, right, or a place that's going to have maritime traffic. And similarly, it runs on a different system. So this one's called AIS, and that operates at 162 megahertz, right inside that cheap SDR range. And so the ship tracking can be done with other additional specialized hardware or with your SDR. They just as much make an image for this. So RPi AIS is a really cool focus-built Raspberry Pi image, just like the one for PiAware that focuses on boats. And so if this is your thing, check it out. I didn't really get into it too much because I do the plane one too myself and I have a lot of experience with it. But if this interests you at all, be my guest. It is super cool. And again, boats are constantly talking. You can see all kinds of great information about cruise ships and tankers and just commercial fleets and vessels. So interesting stuff. And the tool to do it all, right, is AIS Dispatcher, and that's what decodes the data, right? That's that software decoding all that data coming in from our antennas. All right, we're going to move on to our third project. Now, the third project is about going global, right? And so far we've talked about picking up things in very close proximity with our spectrum analyzer, right, our frequency analyzer. And then we talked about things a little bit, away from where we live, like the 200-mile range with our flight trackers and planes and boats and all those other vessels. Let's take our radio and let's go global with it. And so let's jam out with our ham out. And this next project does have components of it that you would need to be licensed technically, but it doesn't stop you from learning. Okay, and so let's get into this. And so we'll talk about APRS. And I'll say this first. I do not have a ham license. I do not broadcast and I do not transmit because of that. But APRS is super cool. For those that aren't ham nerds, I know, here at the Undercroft there was recently a ham training, right, an examination. How many ham licenses were awarded during that session?
Trey, were you want to say three?
3 licenses.
And then some more happened during DEFCON safe mode.
That's fantastic, right? I think having a ham license is super cool. It's something I've been meaning to do, but it's really cool to see like community support for that. It's just one of the many great things about Undercroft that I love is that knowledge, right, and that training. So APRS, right? So this is digital real-time communication through the airwaves. Okay, and what's going on here is we're transmitting packets. Think like internet traffic, and internet plays a role in this too. That's how we end up global. But initially, we're talking about sharing tactical information, right, and messages. What the hell do we mean by tactical? Well, what about GPS of a moving object, like a vehicle? Or maybe even just something as simple as somebody hiking in the woods, right? And you have an APRS transmitter on your backpack. Okay, and we'll get to why any of this is useful, but work with me here. Weather station telemetry. This is a really cool one. So if you're monitoring for signals and you want to share your findings, right? Over here, it's this temperature and this humidity, and over here, it's different. So we have all these measurement points, right? Great data out there, right? Short messages. Think like SMS for hams, right? I can send you a text message, these little short messages. And it's actually gone to a whole nother level. Apparently you can email and mail and deliver and fax things these days too with APRS. And just look it up. Hams and APRS people are fantastic. Now, fun fact, it actually was originally called the Automated Position Reporting System back in the 80s when it was initially put together. In fact, APR comes from the 3 last digits of the developer's ham call sign. So it just so happens that automated packet reporting works. It was made after, so APR came first, then the name. So let's talk about this. One of the cool things you can build with your Raspberry Pi, again we're staying Pi focused here, is these what we call iGates and digipeters. Right? And what the hell is an iGate and a digipeter? Well, ultimately it's your base station, right? And there is dedicated hardware on the market for this kind of stuff, but you can do it with a Raspberry Pi. And so the digipeter listens for radio packets that come in, it receives them, and then it repeats them. Well, that's useful, because signal repeaters really help when you're trying to get a message a long way away, and you can't get there with your own broadcast power, right? And so repeaters are necessary. And again, hams will understand this, but repeaters are part of the ecosystem when you're sending signals very far, especially over a horizon, okay? Except for the flat earthers, then it goes all the way, every time. So a digipeater is a digital repeater, right? It's the Pi take on how we're going to get involved in this. And then there's iGates. So these iGates are super cool too. And what they do is they'll listen for these radio packets just like our digipeter initially does. But the iGate forwards them over the internet. So it captures it and puts it over the internet for everybody else. Okay? Now, these iGates, they can send packets to the proper recipient. So maybe they need to be rebroadcasted somewhere else in the world. So if I dump it over the internet and then everybody else rebroadcasts it, hopefully the person it's destined for will hear it, will capture it, will listen, right? And so it's uploaded online through awesome services like APRS.fi, which, by the way, you can totally go to that website right now and look at where all the APRS iGates are and all of the devices that are broadcasting APRS and that are being picked up by the iGates and the digipeaters. And so you can see the entire network of hardware and people involved in this awesome communication system. Now, I mentioned packets can also come from the internet to be transmitted on your digipeater base station for your local area back on the airwaves. So we're gatewaying from radio to internet back to radio, right? All done through a Raspberry Pi. Okay. Yeah. Thanks for bringing that up here. I know. I don't know if the online folks can they see this? Okay. So this is APRS.fi right now, and we are honed in. Where are we looking here? Oh, there we go. Yep, that's us here in Tampa Bay. And so you can click on any of these devices to see what it is and a little bit of information about it. There's weather stations out there that are broadcasting APRS data that is being received by an iGate and then shared online. There are vehicles moving that are broadcasting their GPS location that's being picked up by an iGate or a digipeater and then shared online. And so this is really cool network of communications that can all be done with a Raspberry Pi and an SDR. So, fun stuff, right? So you can play passively by simply listening to what's going on around you and taking your part and uploading that to the internet to help that message get to maybe where it's going, right? And again, there's a whole nother aspect of this that I haven't really delved into because I don't have a ham license. But messages are destined, and they're like packets on the internet, and the internet is used as a gateway, as an intermediary to reach a farther distance, and all kinds of fun stuff. But this is for the ham people. Do look it up. Do check it out because you can definitely get involved by receiving information. Okay, and so the assembly is a combination of really cool stuff. You have your Raspberry Pi, but you also have a transmitting device if you want to repeat, right? If you want to be a digipeater. And so we take our Pi, and we take an SDR if we just want to receive, or we take an SDR in combination with a transmitter, or we just use a transmitter alone, because technically this thing can send and receive at the same time. You know, it's one device that does receiving and transmitting, right? So there's a multitude of ways you can take it on. But there's a great software suite that goes with this, right? And so that software suite is called Direwolf. And so you get this installed, and the idea is that all of these different APRS signals that are happening in the air from all these different transmitting devices, you can pick them up and you can receive them, and then you can then share them back online, or you can do your part in retransmitting messages. And again, I probably got a couple errors somewhere along the way in this part because, again, I don't have my ham license. But I find this absolutely fascinating. There's an entire communication network in radio that uses the internet to go global, and it can all be achieved with a Raspberry Pi. And that's your way in. Like, that's your key to be a participant. And it's just so cool. And so if you are interested in this, do get your ham license and look it up. So again, it's called APRS. And so that kind of rounds out my 3 projects that you today can go home and do for very cheap, right? I'm talking under $100 in parts to do all of this. And you can have just a lot of fun, right? And you can learn all kinds of new things. And you can experiment, and you can really just get to see what's out there, right? Now, SDR, again, is a whole topic of its own, right? What is capable when you get into radio and when you can get into those kinds of tools, right? But I wanted to focus on what we can do with a Pi and some simple things that can really help us maybe step into that next level of learning. Now, what would I be without showing you some other cool, fun little things you can do? There's a lot more. Remember that list? Let's highlight some of those. First one, weather data. NOAA, or Meteor for the Russians, for the Ruskies, these satellites are constantly floating overhead in geospatial orbit. And at the right time of day, on the right day, you can run outside and you can take your purpose-built 3D printed exactly 53.4 centimeter long antennas at 21 degrees and stick this somewhere, and you basically have to set it horizontal like this, facing south. So the 3D printed thing says, point this middle part south, and it tells you the measurement each one of these arms need to be, and then it tells you the angle, right? And so at 21 inches long, at 120 degree angle, or 53 centimeters for you Europeans, facing south horizontally, you too can, at the right time of day, pick up satellite imagery, like live satellite imagery being broadcasted, being back down to Earth from a NOAA satellite of weather. I mean, if you ask me, it's kind of out of this world. So,
and that was actually one of our questions. What was the purpose of the blue plastic triangle between the antennas on the table?
Yeah, thank you for asking. So I'll come a little bit closer, but basically, this is a 3D printed jig for what we call a dipole antenna, and it highlights it has the pre-configured arc, and then it tells you the length and then the direction for south, and so it's kind of like a helpful template to be able to pick up this weather data. And so you can get this on Thingiverse. And so I printed one out with the hopes that one day I will be in the right place at the right time, because it could be 3 o'clock in the morning on a Tuesday that one of these satellites that's broadcasting flies overhead. And there's great software out there that will help you, right? So this Orbitron is one of the tools on the left that just helps you find where satellites are, and so you can focus in on NOAA 8 and NOAA 9, which are the ones you would normally listen to. But similarly, Meteor 2 is a great weather satellite from Russia that also broadcasts down the images, and so you can use some software with your SDR to receive this stuff. And it takes a while for the picture to come in, and a couple minutes, and then it will process the data. But you ultimately end up with some beautiful photos from space that were taken at that moment in time. It's really cool. And so really fun project. So check it out. Great stuff online about that. I mentioned this one earlier, International Space Station. So the Russian module on the International Space Station has been broadcasting a picture over what's called slow scan television for years, for a long time. And they do change the picture, everyone. They do change it regularly. and so something cool here is there's a website called Space Flight Software. And you're encouraged, if you pick up the photo being broadcasted at the time that the space station's over your head, you're encouraged to go and upload what you received. And so spaceflightsoftware.com is a beautiful library of these images received from different people. I mean, all over the world are going outside to pick up space station broadcasts. Really fun, cool stuff that you can do. This one was picked up more recently. They have, and you can see it's in Russian. They have another one that has like pictures of like helicopters. Like I don't know what they're doing, but I think they're demonstrating their military prowess, because the rest of the photos that they put that aren't a space station are just like planes and helicopters, but like badass planes and helicopters. So it's really cool. Check it out. It's a lot of fun to also talk, or at least listen to the space station when you get an opportunity. So it's another one for you. So next fun little thing you can do with an SDR, and again, all this stuff is really great, especially if you have kids. Love this, right? It's called Radiosondes, and we don't really call them Radiosondes in America. It's more of an international term. I didn't really know what one is until more recently in life, when I got into like drones and stuff like that. But Radiosondes, also known as weather balloons, should have just called it that. They transmit all of their active findings back down during their entire flight. And so a weather balloon will go up, and it will say, you know, altitude, temperature, humidity, all the measuring factors during this weather balloon's flight. And then ultimately that weather balloon will pop and fall back to Earth, and it needs to say like, hey, I'm over here, come collect me. And so they'll be constantly broadcasting. And so there's people online that will like they'll go on hunting adventures for radiosondes, and they will like they'll set up their devices, and they'll find them and hone in on signal strength. And radiosondes often, when you find them, have like how to send me home instructions on them. Like, I belong to this research lab. Here's my address and phone number. Like, if you find me, please call this number, and we'll come retrieve it from you, or you can mail it back to us, right? Because these research balloons are very important. In fact, balloons are, I believe, sent out twice a day in most of the research spots. So this picture comes from Boulder, Colorado. And so it will fly up, do all of its collections, pop, and then fall back to Earth softly. And as you can see from the software, it travels quite a bit, so they got to go and get it. And the only way to know where it is if it's broadcasting, and it's screaming in the airwaves, right? And so super cool, fun stuff. If you ever want to do like HABs or high altitude balloons and things like that measure, or if you ever want to like send up a GoPro to see the curvature of the Earth to prove all the flat earthers wrong, you have to still broadcast so that you know where your device is. Because the winds are going to carry it, right? So these are fun, really cool stuff to look up. I wouldn't suggest going and hunting radiosondes, because all you're going to do is find something that you have to give back. You're not supposed to keep it. So anyways, research purposes only, but super fun. I think that's interesting. And then finally, good old FM. But there's more, right? FM isn't just FM radio. First off, hey, what does FM mean? Frequency modulation, exactly. And so frequency modulation, or what we like to call music that we listen to, is a lot more than it used to be, right, when it was first being done. So today we have stuff like RDS. And so RDS is the radio data system. Have you ever been in your car and your radio knew the name of the song, the artist of the song, the album of the song, the genre of the music, and what station you were listening to by call sign, not by frequency number? It's called RDS. And so small bits of data are being transmitted alongside your FM music. And so you can pick up RDS data and read this. And you can also, with the little PortaPack, broadcast RDS data and do some kind of testing and experimentation with that. And so so that's just one step up from doing this with software-defined radios. But the next one is HD radio. And HD radio is really interesting. And I put a lot of information about it. But to really simplify it, HD radio is completely different than like standard FM, frequency modulated wide audio, right? And what it is HD radio is entirely digital. This is crazy stuff. It actually was developed to like kind of overlap or run with FM radios, so that a radio station has the capability of transmitting legacy FM and HD radio at the same time, and they can actually like put more effort into one or the other for that same frequency range. And so this results in what we call an in-band on channel. And so they're both existing there. And so it's like a hybrid of digital data that's through an AC codec that has to do all this crazy stuff versus just listening to the frequency modulation that we all know and love. So there is more that you can do with the radio with your SDR than just listening to music. There is data out there that you are capable of playing with and learning about. So experiment away. So I know we're like an hour and a half into this, and we've went over all these cool projects. First off, are there any questions before I go on to the next section? Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, so we've got a couple here. So from RJ45, what's the reason for 8+ antennas on the Wi-Fi routers and the new Hack5 Pineapple?
So the reason for multiple antennas on a device is because each one of those antennas can only be fixed to a particular frequency at a time. And so to be able to be, first off, Wi-Fi isn't just one channel. Like 802.11b is 11 channels. Right. But you can only exist on one channel at a time. And so having multiple antennas allows you to do what we call MIMO, multi-input, multi-output, and multi-channel capabilities. So it's not just to look fancy, it gives you multiple channel support at the same time. So there is a benefit to it, but it also kind of looks cool. So hope that answers your question.
From Excrucio, what do you think of the Mayhem firmware on the PortaPack?
So the question is, what do I think of the Mayhem firmware? I love it. So when I first got it, PortaPack firmware is the base firmware that you can get, and it's open source. And then the before Mayhem was called Havoc. And so Havoc was around for a long time. And the Havoc is what really took the PortaPack and turned it into like the hacker's dream tool because it added a ton of functionality to the PortaPack. So Havoc has actually, the open source project has since discontinued. And so Mayhem is actually the only thing right now that exists for the PortaPack with continued development and support. So I wouldn't just suggest it because of its feature set, but I also suggest it because it's current. So I hope that answers your question.
The metal enclosures are recommended for the SDRs over plastic?
So the metal enclosures in a radio, there's an actual purpose for it because the metal enclosure will deflect noise interference. And there's a very deep radio theory that can go around it. But generally, when something is enclosed by metal, it's protecting it from interference. And so that means you'll get a cleaner signal. And so the plastic ones, why I mentioned that the metal RTL-SDR.com version is better is because it's enclosed in metal, therefore it doesn't get as much interference. And also the components inside are much more sensitive to that interference, so you have to shield them. Kind of like a Faraday shield, right? When we're talking about any kind of radio device, you've probably heard like a Faraday cage. If you put a cell phone or a laptop in it, radio signal, gone, right? And so we want to keep our signal as clean as possible to process it.
Can you get, oh, sorry, go ahead, Mark.
That body itself is like just pie sitting there is giving off
oh my God.
noise interference on its own.
And the power noise interference is terrible too. And so having that case grounded, it neutralizes a lot of that. So very good point.
Can you get an adapter that allows you to connect SDR to a traditional coax?
So an SDR, being software defined, is a USB component only. And so on the other end, though, if you're talking about the antenna end, yes, you can convert the antenna end to all the different adapters. But when it comes to an SDR, it's a software-defined radio. Therefore, there has to be a software component controlling the radio device. It has to tell it what to tune to. So they will always be computer dependent in some form or fashion because we've abstracted all of that filtering hardware back to the software. But if you want to connect arbitrary antennas, most of my SDRs use an SMA connector. But if you have antennas that are BNC, or coax, or a variety of other copper core based cables, absolutely, there's an adapter for everything. So don't think that there's a limitation on hooking up your SDR to any particular type of antenna based off the connector. You can either purchase it or make it yourself with a crimper.
Cool.
So. All right. We're all good. Thank you online. I do appreciate your questions. Keep them coming. So let's talk about the important questions, not yours, but these. The more you know, and we'll keep you out of trouble too. All right, and I've talked about a couple things that maybe require a license. We've also covered that transmitting is a no-no, right? And so let's get into this, right? Do I need a ham license? Well, no. The first two projects were entirely passive. I don't have a ham license. I'm not doing anything illegal. It's in the air, right? It's already out there, so you can listen. Again, if you're sitting in a coffee shop and somebody says their credit card number or social security number really loudly, that's not your problem for hearing it. Now, if they broadcast it and you pick it up over your Wi-Fi in promiscuous mode, a little questionable, but similar concept. They said it, unencrypted. So it's in the air. Now, there are some caveats, right? It's not as simple as no, but we're just going to say no, the star asterisk law, and we'll get into that in a second. Now, yes, if you want to broadcast, right, and you want to participate, and you want to do stuff like APRS, right? And you think those messages are cool, and you want to get a call sign. You know, a lot of the executive team and founders and members here are getting into ham, so I encourage it. I think it's wonderful. And so, yes, right? And those different licenses will get you different capabilities. Plus, it's fun. You know, get in and explore. What's up?
That only, I guess, that only really applies to specific frequencies, though, correct? Because you have bands like the ISM band where pretty much anything can you repeat.
Yeah, and so the question was, is still having a ham license is to a specific frequency? And yes, right? You can't go willy-nilly all over the place. You can't set up a radio station, right? Not going to happen because one, the frequency is already registered with the FCC, and two, your broadcast power strength is you're not allowed to broadcast that strong, right? You know, radio stations are in the hundreds of watts. They're broadcasting for hundreds of miles. You're not allowed to do that. So yes, different levels for broader frequencies and strengths, right? But again, it's a very well-defined space too. So yes, it's not just do whatever you want. But learn about it, have fun, explore. There's plenty of information online to help you determine if that's something you want to get into. Let's talk about the laws. This is the law that screws you every time you want to listen. This is the only thing that really makes listening bad. And so the Electronic Communication Privacy Act of 1986, which has been amended by our favorite Patriot Act, I don't want to say favorite, but has been regularly updated to comply with additional things. U.S. Code, or 18 U.S. Code, section 2510, definition, subsection 16, whatever, right? Point is D, underlined here, says something very specific. Transmitted over a communication system provided by a common carrier, air, unless the communication is a tone-only paging system, right? And that's like beep, boop, beep, boop, right? So basically this is saying that you are not allowed to listen to a communication system over a common carrier where defined by this fancy use. And what the hell does all this mean, right? This is just one little sentence. What it means is you can't deal with encrypted data or special data, right? Or encoded data because it's meant to be hidden from you. And like pagers, we talked about pagers, right? Commercial pager data, POCSAG, Flex, hospital data. What do you think a hospital is transmitting over their encoded pager network?
Medical records.
Medical records, PII, PHI, stuff. Now, how do we fix that? Well, in a computer cybersecurity world, we would improve encryption, right? We would use very, very strong ciphers. We would establish a protocol or a means that was proprietary. No, we don't want to change the way things work. We just want to make a law that makes it illegal. So don't go decoding your hospital pager data. anyways, don't do it.
So, I mean, I think it's pretty self-explanatory, but Cyber Agent 47 question, is it illegal to listen to the police transmissions in real time, and can the Pi with one of the attachables be configured?
Okay, so to repeat your question, can you listen to police stuff? This is a great question, and the answer is yes. And so there's two caveats to this, though. It's a yes and it's a no. Yes, if it's unencrypted, that means it's broadcasted. So I do listen to police data, fire, ambulance, like that's all over. In fact, you can actually listen to this online. So if you've ever heard of the term a police scanner, it's exactly what you're talking about. It's a purpose-built piece of hardware to listen to police chatter. Now you can do it with an SDR, very simple. You can also do it online for free because people record with an SDR wherever in the world they are and then broadcast it over the internet as a live audio stream. Now, you can't listen to police data if it's encrypted. And what that means is that there's a chip or a configuration in the police radio hardware that only allows them to talk to each other. And so it's not that you can't by law. I mean, you're not supposed to decrypt it, but there's also a level of difficulty that you simply can't get past, which is the encrypted traffic. Now, obviously, enough money and time into anything, it'll get pwned. But generally, only unencrypted police chatter is easy to pick up. But you absolutely can listen. There's nothing stopping you from picking up public service radio. So hopefully that answers your question.
And then one more, if you don't mind. So from
Sure.
Philly Tech Club, where does LoRa fit in?
LoRaWAN. So LoRaWAN, which is the question, where does that fit into all this? It fits in similarly to what I'm talking about here at the bottom. And so this slide answers your question. And so let me go through it and then I'll highlight your specific thing. So again, let's not decrypt intentionally encrypted data. Let's not decode intentionally encoded data. We're not going to fix the system. We're just going to make it illegal, right? Because if it ain't broken yet, we're going to break it even more. So now, transmitting without a license, I mentioned this, right? And again, where and when and how and stuff like that is part of your license structure. But things you cannot do. Pirate radio. Do not do that. You are capable of doing it. Doesn't mean you should do it. Emergency services. Don't mess with the emergency services. Seriously, there's somebody's life at stake. It's just not worth it, okay? Airplanes. We talked about how we can receive a lot of that chatter. You are capable of broadcasting your own ADSB information and pretending to be a fake airplane. There was a lot of research around this. It was very controversial at DEF CON. A lot of different federal agencies showed up to a particular fly a plane sideways talk.
Yeah, I remember that.
Just don't mess with airplanes. The onboard systems could potentially do all kinds of evasive autoflight maneuvers if a plane is detected too close, and you can injure and kill individuals. It's also extremely illegal. The PortaPack can broadcast ADSB. Okay, so now those exceptions, right? Where does all the normal things we do when it comes to broadcasting? Well, our laptop broadcasts, right? It's a receive and transmit process. Bluetooth, right? Little things. So where are our exceptions? Super low power, close range, right? You're allowed to do these things. You're allowed to use an FM transmitter in your car. For instance, it can take an adapt to your cell phone and it broadcasts on a very, 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 very low power FM frequency that's about the bubble of your car so that you can play the music. These were very popular about a decade ago. Okay. And then all of the other normal stuff, right? So Wi-Fi, Bluetooth. This includes LoRaWAN, Zigbee, Z-Wave, right? All those small wireless intercommunication protocols, right? And so obviously you don't need a license to do that. We call it the 2.4 gigahertz like open use spectrum, whatever. So that's really the only time you get to transmit stuff legally. So, all right. That covers the legal stuff. Good. I hope I knew it would answer it. That was good. All right, so just one more time, don't do it. That's it. Just want to leave it at that. We're not going to talk about it again. Do not do it. And I mean this. Don't be that person because you're going to screw it up for the rest of us. That goes to you, Internet. Don't be that person. Don't be this guy. So this was an art installation in New York City that was set up, and those are 3 pagers receiving pager data from the various area hospitals and services, and then printing out every single message it received.
Oh my God.
That paper contained all kinds of delicate information. This was an art installation. It was also illegal. But you can look it up. It's called the Holypager. There's some cool stuff online. You can look about it. I wouldn't replicate it, but it's kind of interesting to read about. So they captured this, and anyways, don't do that. All right, let me send you home with some great stuff. You too can learn some of my favorite YouTube channels that I watch to learn about this. Andreas Spies. Guy is brilliant. I think I mentioned him about some Raspberry Pi stuff earlier, but he's really big on LoRaWAN. So if you're interested in LoRaWAN, Andreas, great YouTube channel, awesome hobbyist, really fun videos, and he approaches all of his videos like he's teaching in a classroom. And his favorite saying is, you want to sit in the front row, the first row. He's very big on just information and learning. So great YouTube channel. TechMinds is another one. They have so much SDR stuff. They have all the different hardware and all the tools, and they have tutorials on how to build a PortaPack and how to flash it and how to use it and set it up, and just it's so much cool stuff if you want to really just get some great hands-on instructional to really extend to this. And then there's great channels out there like Modern Ham, right? Just enthusiasts sharing what they're learning about when they're messing with SDR. And when they're experimenting, they're learning in the software and the hardware. And so these are some great YouTube channels, along with the Undercroft YouTube channel, that you can subscribe to and check out to learn more about some of the things that we talked about today. And so that really rounds it out. We're hitting the last 10 minutes of our 2-hour block. I really do like to go for those 2 hours. So let's take these 10 minutes here and see if there's any additional questions from the online viewers, and stuff like that. So
yeah, we've got
Sure.
Wooten. Can you ask John to tune in to 446.000 70 cm calling channel?
we will do that right after the broadcast when we get our hands on the hardware.
And then from Shizzle, best SDR for capturing the signals from newer cars. What is the best SDR capturing the
So
signals
when we're talking
from
about newer cars, there's a lot. So here's the thing, right? A modern vehicle, let's say a brand new 2020 car, has a ton of radios in it. And when I mean radios, I'm not just talking the one you listen to music on. So the first system, car broadcast, is called a TPMS, or tire pressure monitoring system. The PortaPack can read the radio coming from your tire, from your wheel, that's transmitting its pressure and temperature. I believe it's 315.
What was it, the app 433 can decode it?
Oh yeah, RTL 433. Yeah, but about, I think it's 315 megahertz is the frequency at which the TPMS system operates. The second radio your car has is Bluetooth, so that's 2.4 gigahertz. Modern cars now also have hotspots in them, so we're talking about both 2.4 and 5 gigahertz. And then there's the variety of other potential radio devices. Now, if there's something more specific, I maybe could chime in. Oh, and then you're talking about unlocks. Of course, you want to steal a car. Great. So to unlock a car, now there's some cars yes, some cars no. And so modern lock and unlock technology uses frequency hopping and uses a bunch of different techniques to make it difficult to clone or emulate. The PortaPack supports a couple of manufacturers built in to do signal capture and signal replay. It's similar to modern garages. Garages back in the day used to be dip switch based. Therefore, you could just tune to the exact frequency and then pulse the signal. Now, again, they're using frequency hopping and all kinds of other initiatives and technologies to avoid theft and cloning. But I encourage you to research this stuff because we're getting into a borderline of ethicalness. Yes, it's capable. Yes, it's possible. but I don't want to encourage it unless it's for research purposes only.
Not really a question, but a comment from SWFL-SEC about
hey,
the
Mike.
weather balloons.
Yeah.
A father and daughter launched their own balloon a couple years ago in Kalamazoo, Michigan. I think they have a blog for it. A farmer found it months later after they had ended their search.
Mike, that's a wonderful story that you had an opportunity to launch a weather balloon with your daughter in Kalamazoo, Michigan. And that's the thing is you put the your contact info on the weather balloon's main device, and even though it may have been lost, like you said, for months, somebody found it, and that's super cool. And that's what a lot of these research balloons and radiosondes are doing is they're constantly being sent up with the expectation of being recovered. But at least during their flight, they are broadcasting all of the metric data. So, but very cool. Not a lot of people get the opportunity to launch a high altitude balloon, especially if you're near a dense area, whether it could land in traffic or in airport planes and stuff. So it sounds like Michigan was a great place to send it out over some fields.
That's looking like that's it. Well, RJ's typing, so he might have one more.
We'll let that last one come in.
Yeah, it's probably a meme. We'll see.
It might be a meme.
I'll 3-to-1 that it's a meme. Any takers?
With that, again, we've talked about some really fun hardware today. I encourage everybody to go out and take your Raspberry Pis that you may already have and pair it with a software-defined radio, something like one of these entry-level devices from RTL-SDR.com. Not really pimping them, I just love their hardware. And they have a ton of blog posts, articles, and how-tos. You can really get started on some of this stuff. I'll make sure to have these slides sent over to the Undercroft crew. So we'll be posted online for everybody to review. And outside of that, I've had a wonderful time researching and preparing this presentation and talk over the past couple weeks. I can't wait for my next opportunity. With that, I want to thank everybody for tuning in tonight, watching online. Hope you have a safe and wonderful evening surfing those airwaves and staying out of trouble. Thank you.
Thanks, John.
Woo!